surprisingly few unambiguous villains in Greek mythology. We mostly see messy conflicts between parties of gods and/or noble-blooded mortals, operating on a very different moral paradigm than that of most modern-day people. And then there's Typhon, the giant screaming monster made of snakes whose exclusive goal in life is to violently overthrow the gods and plunge the universe into chaos. We can safely call this guy problematic. Most classical sources tell us that Typhon was the offspring of Gaia, the primordial earth goddess, and Tartarus, the pit that makes up the lowest reaches of the Greek cosmos. And Gaia sent their son to usurp the Olympians as revenge for their subjugation of her Titan children, which they did because the Titans were subjugating her Cyclops and Hecatonchire children. Gaia isn't very good at making her kids get along, and I haven't even made a video on the Gigantomachy yet. But according to Homeric hymn number 3 to Apollo, and also the poet Stesichorus apparently, Typhon was actually immaculately conceived by Zeus's wife Hera. The story goes she was ticked off at her husband for giving birth to Athena from his head. So to get back at him, she decided to give birth to a kid of her own who would be even stronger than Zeus. Interestingly, this mirrors the birth of Hephaestus told in Hesiod's Theogony, except in that one, instead of an apocalyptic monster, she just had a kind of ugly baby. In Greek mythology, monsters are usually conceived of as perversions of nature. You might take a person or an animal and give it immense size, additional heads or limbs, and maybe slap on some traits from other creatures. Typhon is all those ideas cranked up to 11. He's the largest of all Gaia's giant children, he's got hundreds of limbs all made out of screaming serpents and dragons, he's got wings, he spits fire, he's the ultimate most monstrous monster of all monster kind. And so he leaves quite a big mark on Greek mythology. But before we get into that, I gotta tell you about this video's sponsor, HelloFresh. One of my goals for this year is to try and get at least slightly competent in the kitchen, and with HelloFresh, I found myself shockingly making a lot of progress in that department. My knife skills could still use some work, at least according to my friend who helped shoot this B-roll. Thanks for the critique, Pat. With HelloFresh, you get to pick from over 35 fun and easy meals, which they'll send to you each week. You get a recipe and all the ingredients you need pre-portioned. I didn't have to worry about buying too many veggies just for them to shrivel away in the fridge. Pretty sustainable. The packaging is recyclable too, though it makes for a good cat house in the meantime. This week, my favorite meals were the black bean and pepper quesadillas and the one-pan stir-fry tacos. Both super easy to make, only took me about 15 minutes, and were better than anything I could have thought to whip up on my own. It was also cheaper than anything similar I could have bought from a restaurant. HelloFresh meals save you 25% on average versus takeout. And you can save even more with HelloFresh if you sign up with my code. If you go to HelloFresh.com with the link in the description and use code W21 at checkout, you'll get 21 free meals from HelloFresh plus free shipping. That's spelled double YOO21 with my link in the description. Thanks HelloFresh for sponsoring this video and for helping me start to feel like a capable home cook for the first time in ever. Now let's get back to Typhon. So as you can imagine, Typhon didn't have a very wide dating pool, so he paired up with Echidna. No, not that Echidna, and definitely not that one. I mean Echidna, the half-woman, half-serpent daughter of the sea gods Phorcys and Ceto. And from her and Typhon's loins sprang some of the most notable monsters in Greek mythology. Many of them you'll remember from the adventures of our boy Heracles, who I made 3 videos about. Like, comment, subscribe. There's Cerberus, the 3-headed dog of the underworld, the Lernaean Hydra, a serpent that grows 2 heads for each one cut off. And if you've heard of a different version of the Hydra, I made a video about that. The Nemean lion with its impenetrable, though unfortunately not strangle-proof pelt. Orthus, the 2-headed dog who guarded the red cattle of Geryon. And the Hesperian dragon which guarded the golden apples. They also begot the Chimera, a fire-breathing monster with the combined body of a lion, a goat, and a dragon, which was trained by a guy named Amisodorus to terrorize the countryside and its livestock. And that was a real asshole move by Amisodorus. I have no idea what his deal was. It would eventually be slain by the hero Bellerophon, son of Poseidon, riding on the winged horse Pegasus. Classical art and literature just have him spearing the Chimera or capping it with arrows, but the later 12th century medieval poet John Tsetses describes a much more interesting battle. By the way, shout out to Publius Covitus Naso from the OSP Discord for translating this passage to English. That was extremely helpful. He describes Bellerophon being unable to pierce the skin of the Chimera, so he attaches a piece of lead to the tip of his spear and melts it over the monster's flaming breath. Then the molten lead drips into the Chimera's mouth and solidifies inside, killing it. You've probably heard this version of the story before and may have thought it came straight from ancient Greece. It is possible that John was working with a now lost Greek or Roman source. In the same passage, he mentions another detail to the story which he attributes to Lysias. But given that, as far as I can tell, there's not even any classical art depicting this version of the story, I'm leaning towards it being a medieval invention. If anyone has more information though, please let me know. I find it super neat when myths evolve beyond their classical sources and then become so ingrained that we don't even notice. Hey, it's Jake from the future. I got borged, by the way, and I'm almost done editing this video, but I was just informed that there's actually an earlier source mentioning the story with the molten lead. It's from a 6th century commentary on the works of Gregory of Nazianzus, who was the Archbishop of Constantinople in the 4th century. So it's possible that that version of the Chimera myth originated in very, very late pagan tradition, but it's still pretty inconclusive. So yeah, thank you people of the OSP Discord for being extremely helpful for my videos. Another child of Typhon and Echidna was the Sphinx, a winged half-woman, half-lion creature who preyed on the people of Thebes who failed to guess the answer to her riddle. That is, until Oedipus managed to solve it, and she decided to die. And then there was the Caucasian eagle, which Zeus would send to torment Prometheus for stealing fire. Caucasian as in it was from the Caucasus region, not Caucasian like, you know, me. And that's just to name a few. Someone get Echidna a Mom of the Year award, and a nap. And so, after Typhon was done with all that procreating, he barreled up to Olympus to make battle with Zeus. And when this happened, some of the later sources tell us that the other gods were scared, so they ran away to Egypt and disguised themselves as animals. Hermes disguised as an ibis, Apollo a hawk, Artemis was a cat, etc. And I just find that to be a very cute attempt at explaining Hellenistic syncretism. Anyway, Zeus came at Typhon wielding the adamant sickle once used by his father Cronus. But then, surprise, Typhon kicked Zeus's ass, took the sickle, and cut out all his muscle sinews, rendering him unable to move. Remember, most Greek gods can't die, so you need to get creative if you want to depose them. This would have marked a permanent end to Zeus's reign, except Hermes and Pan came to the rescue and stole back his sinews, allowing for the two adversaries to have a rematch. And while researching sources for this story, I found a fun but obscure excerpt from 2nd century poet Oppian, where Pan then lures Typhon with a banquet of fish, allowing Zeus to jump in for a surprise attack. And I thought that was hilarious, so I'm including it here. Now, the final fate of Typhon differs depending on the source. Hesiod has Zeus strike him with his thunderbolt, sending him down into Tartarus for all of eternity, except he can still annoy people with wind apparently. But others like Aeschylus say that Zeus took Mount Etna and threw it on top of Typhon, pinning him underneath. And to this day, he's trapped there spewing fire from the mountain's peak, this obviously serving as an etiological myth explaining Mount Etna's high volcanic activity. The fate of Typhon's ladylove Echidna also varies. If you ask Hesiod, her divine heritage made her immortal, and she just chills in her cave most of the time. Not too shabby. But according to the hymn to Apollo, the same that puts Hera as Typhon's mother, Echidna wasn't so lucky. That source tells of how Apollo shot her with an arrow, sending her into a rolling fit of agony, until she died and rotted away in the hot sun. That, I gotta admit, is pretty shabby. That's too bad for her.